Hey guys, Justin here. Today I'm going to be walking you through how I made my latest horror short film, Enter. So Enter is kind of like a concept short. It's based around this idea that a man hears a knocking at his door in the middle of the night and goes to investigate. Those of you who know me might know that I'm a huge fan of Stranger Things. I really love the cinematography of that show, the sound design, editing. I really love the vibes it creates and how it can just draw you into the story. One night a couple months ago, I'm rewatching Stranger Things with my dad. He had never seen season 4 before. Season 4 is incredible. And I look out the window and it's just insanely foggy out. And like the street lamps around my neighborhood are giving off this really neat, like reddish glow. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to go get my camera. I didn't even have a story in mind at all. I just thought the fog looked really cool outside and I wanted to shoot some footage with it. And Enter was born out of that. Every shot was just the FX30 on a tripod, the Sigma 16mm, wide open, manual focus. So yeah, let's get into it. I really love this opening shot. You have the knock and the door opens, and that immediately sort of creates this frame within a frame situation where immediately all your attention is drawn to the center of the image. And it's super silhouetted, which is instantly attention grabbing. So the light sources for this shot are literally like this street lamp and this street lamp. There's another street lamp like here that's shooting light down. And then there's these like practical house lights. And that's really it. But what you're getting is the light is just diffused across the entire sky because of this fog. So it's like this like really thick fog that's catching the light. And then you just have hella shadow here, hella shadow here. You got your kind of like outline of the door here. Of course, your subject, which is me, is fully in shadow. As you'll see in this film, the main technique I used was backlighting and like silhouetting because I didn't have any lights of my own. I was literally just working with the street lamps outside, and I still wanted to make images that were really dynamic and had a lot of contrast to them. I also really love here how like the light is like seeping in through the door hinges. That's a really nice touch. Another thing I want to point out is that as I get farther away, I actually step into the light of this street lamp a little bit, so you can almost see it starting to like edge light my shoulders here, and then you get a really clear like shadow on the ground. Even though I'm already silhouetted here, we get a nice little shadow of me that's being cast from this light. So for this shot, we finally get the street lamp that was lighting me in the previous shot. It's up here, obviously, shooting its light down on me, and so I'm getting these really nice, like, rim light splotches here on me, like where it's lighting this part of me, and then even like a hair / edge light too, you can see. But that all starts to fall off towards the right side of the frame, and everything just sort of falls into darkness here. Like, you can see the outline of my shadow is barely being punched out from the background, and it's just this entire body that is me is dark and silhouetted. We have our light source here, which is this street lamp, and the lens picked up a lot of halation around it, and that's mainly because of the fog. There's a lot of, like I said, texture in the air, and so that being between the street lamp is going to create a lot of halation here. I didn't add any halation in post or use a filter or anything. This was just what the fog was doing, which I thought was really cool. This light is kind of going out in all directions. Obviously, it's spilling out towards me, but it's also hitting the lamppost over here. If I were to draw the cone of light that this street lamp is creating, it would look something like this. And you really just like sort of feel the unease of this character looking around. I also really love that you can see the fog like moving in front of the light. Then I walk out of frame. This shot is really cool. So it starts from black, and I basically walk away from camera and reveal this like wide shot of the neighborhood. It's sort of letting the audience slowly figure out where we're at and what's going on. And just like the fog in this shot is insane. So we have our light source, which you can see is this street lamp up here. And obviously that's spreading in this sort of cone pattern. It's hitting this house here, so we're sort of getting this beam of light here. And same with the tree, it's kind of hitting the tree and lighting the edges of the leaves there is really subtle, but my favorite part of the shot, actually, believe it or not, is right over here. And that's because there's like some giant stadium lights outside of my neighborhood behind this house, and the fact that they were on allowed for this roof to have a backlight and be popped out from the background. If there was no light there, that part of the shot would just not really look that interesting, but because that roof was backlit, it adds more depth to the environment. You can see the fog sort of blooming around the rooftop. So again, we have me, the silhouettes outlined in the front, and everything that the light doesn't touch is kind of falling into shadow here. And yeah, so this is basically like key light here, practical light sources that are sort of peppering the frame with light, and then you have me sort of in the foreground, a really stark shadow. That's a nice frame right there. So here's another thing I really like that Stranger Things does, especially in Stranger Things 4, there's a scene where the flashlight beams have their own sound effects, like not clicking on the flashlight, the beam of light every time it crosses the frame or flares the camera. So for my little flashlight transition, I did the same thing, and if you listen, you can hear it whoosh when I step by. So this is one of the longer shots in the piece, and because I'm shooting this all locked off, I don't have any camera movements or anything. I wanted to try and create longer shots that served multiple purposes. So for this shot, I mean, it does a lot of things. You have me opening the door, creating another sort of silhouette, frame within frame kind of thing. Then you have me turning on the light as the character is now looking into the house, and the flashlight creates a lens flare in the camera as well, which changes the shot a little bit. Then I walk forward, changing the framing of the shot into a mid shot. It was sort of a wide shot before, and then I turn the flashlight, pointing it at the wall, and then I hear the knock, and then I turn back towards the camera again, flaring the camera again, but also creating this sort of blue cast across the shot. And now the shot looks like totally different. Now it's one of those like sci-fi, like light searching shots. So this is just one shot, but I've achieved a lot of different things from a story perspective here, progressing the plot forward. We have the street lamps outside, but the flashlight is the key light of this entire shot. And when I get close to the camera and point it at the wall, it creates like a bounce or like a book light situation. So we have the flashlight here. This is our source, and the flashlight is shooting light basically like this. So light from the flashlight bounces off this beige wall and back at me. So basically everything that's lighting me here, like this sort of highlight here on my hands, the light hitting my neck and my shirt, and the light hitting my face, this is all bounced light off of the wall. Whenever you bounce light in general, it gets a little bit softer, and even with a flashlight, it works the same way. A small note is that this wall being beige actually favors my skin tone a little. Obviously, I'm melanated, and a beige wall as opposed to a plain white wall bounces a little more warmth off. So I really have this nice warm flashlight glow that I'm leaning into by bouncing the flashlight off this wall. And then of course, like the rest of this piece, the other half of my body is in shadow. Again, this is a nice contrasted image created by a light source coming in from the side and lighting pieces of the frame. It's just a really nice transition from shadows to highlights here, which makes this shot like really soft. This shot is the last shot of the piece, the lake shot, which I think is the money shot here, because just look at how many sources of light they are, plus they're being reflected across a lake. So for every source of light, you actually have two little patches of light in this frame. This is a shot where I put a digital zoom in on to sort of build tension, and of course the music is building. You start to hear some of the growlings of the creature that I'm pursuing or is pursuing me. Basically, you have your patch of lights over here, you have a patch of lights over here, you have a little patch of light over here, little patch of light over here, and then behind this immediate row of lights, there's more light back here, which is causing the sky to glow really orange. And we have this kind of patch of light here that your eyes are naturally drawn towards. And then if we look at how the shoreline of this lake curves, There's a little bit of symmetry here, and that also sort of directs you towards the middle of the frame. And then of course me, the subject, being dead center in the frame and being silhouetted again as usual. The flashlight that I'm holding in my hands is giving off a beam that's actually visible. It's very slight, but if you look here you can see. And this frame really follows the pattern I set with the rest of the piece, which is having your darkest elements closest to camera, like in the foreground. So like me, first of all, and then these branches, the closer elements, are just basically being silhouetted by the light that's in the background of the image. It's a nice little trick, because when you have no light and no control over your light, and you're still trying to create contrast in your image, pick something that has light in the background and then create a foreground of just silhouette. So you're still feeling what your character is feeling. You still feel close to your character. So I think really leaning into the darkness here allowed me to still create engaging images, even though I never really lit my foreground of my shots at all. And I'm dead. And just for fun, I wanted to create a credits, like a really simple credit sequence for this film, because I don't think I've created a credit sequence ever for any of my films. And I wanted to basically just have a long shot that goes behind all my credits. So I literally just did this little pan across the lake with focus close up on this branch so that the rest of the lake would fall out of focus. It was really just for fun, and also just to practice making my credits part of the storytelling as well, because that's something that I really like when like films or TV shows do that. So again, I literally used street lamps and a flashlight to light this film, and I shot it in the dead of night, which really just goes to show how much you can do with backlighting and silhouetting your subject. And it was a really good experiment. I mean, I feel like even if I'm someday DPing a bigger film and I have a lighting package and control over my environment and everything, I still think backlighting and silhouetting is a really cool visual technique that I want to keep utilizing. So we're in DaVinci Resolve, and let's take a look at this grade real quick. First thing I want to do is I want to shout out Cinegrams. They make a lot of LUTs and other editing essentials, and they have some really cool movie looks and TV show looks, and I used one of them as my starting point for this grade. So this is our log image. This is where we started with this grade, and the first thing I did was my color space transform. I used Phantom LUT's neutral FX6 LUT here, and that corrected my footage from S-Log3 to Rec 709, and you can already see how much contrast is in it now. After that, I used Cinegrams LUT for Fight Club, and I applied that to get the red in the highlights and the sort of green in the shadows. That was sort of the Stranger Things-ish look that I was going for. I made a couple tweaks to arrive exactly where I wanted it, and then on the node before that, I just denoised. I don't even know if you can see the difference with or without the denoising, but hey, it can't hurt. So we started at S-Log3, then converted to Rec 709 using the neutral FX6 LUT, and then I used Cinegrams Fight Club LUT to give the red highlights and green shadows and overall the look I was going for. But in order to get these really clean, like, night shots, I basically just crushed my shadows. Having lifted shadows makes the fog feel really thick, which I liked, but I didn't think the image really popped, so I decided to just crush my shadows and lose a bit of that information, but create a more moody and poignant image. Also, one of the biggest things I've learned is that when you're trying to make a low light image look cleaner as far as noise goes, crushing your blacks will just make them look smoother and more natural. My goal with this grade was really to create a stark image that I thought really stood out. And it took a couple of tries. Like, I graded this entire film a couple times and wasn't happy with how it was looking. And I was just like, it wasn't bad, but just it wasn't what I was envisioning for it. And sometimes your grades will take a couple tries to get what you're really going for. I feel like the key is to just focus on how you want your film to feel compared to necessarily what you want it to look like. For me, I wanted it to feel really dark and murky, like you couldn't see or tell what was going on. And every new attempt I made at grading the film, I slowly pushed the colors towards that sort of darkness, which is where I ended up. So the moral of the story is basically to just keep trying new things in your grade and have your choices be informed by what you want the film to ultimately feel like. Someone also made the comment that the grade kind of looks like the Batman. which in hindsight it kind of does because of like how dark it is and like the halation of the lights and things like that. But I took that as a huge compliment because, I mean, as you guys know, I love Greg Fraser's work, and to be compared to that in any sense was awesome. But there is something to it of just like the really warm lights and the sort of green palette in the shadows. It is a little Batman. Well, that's it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed Enter. It was a really fun project to make and sort of push myself on. If you haven't seen the short film, go check it out. It's only like a minute long, so what are you waiting for? And leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more cinematography and color grading content. Peace.